Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I am Ruchir Joshi. I'm a writer and filmmaker based in Kolkata, and I will be presenting this evening's program, both the films and the talk and the Q&A afterwards. I won't take up too much time right now because it's a long evening, and just to say that this is the Satyajit Ray season, who we call in Bengali Satyajit Ray, so I may switch from one to the other because I slip. And one of his main contemporaries in Calcutta in filmmaking was a man called Ghatak, Ghatak, same. And very, very different people, many overlaps between their films, but very different filmmakers. And there's a great rivalry between them, a great debate, and also a friendship, and it's just complicated, which I will talk about more in the talk. It's just to say that I thought it was appropriate that a Satyajit Ray season across 1 year should have at least one Ghatak film as a kind of taste changer, if you like, and at the same time complementary, because as you will see with this film and the Mahanagar, the next one, the big city, there are several thematic and narrative overlaps, and at the same time they're both very different films. So this was made in 1960, and cloud-capped star Meghe Dhaka Tara, exact translation from Bengali to English. Actually, it's a quote from Shakespeare, I think a sonnet, Cloud-Capped Star or something. So he has, the person who wrote the short story, which was a very short story, I think may have taken that quote from Shakespeare, and then Ghatak kept the same title. So enjoy. It's a strange creature, this film. It's regarded as a classic of Indian cinema, but as you will see, there are many things that you may not expect in it. Go with the flow, and then we will talk more afterwards. Right? Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to this impressive crowd of cinephiles undeterred by beautiful summer weather. We've heard from Ruchir that there was already good turnout for the first film, and this is sort of a unique event in our series because it actually consists of 2 screenings, but you'll still be able to follow the second film and to talk if you've only arrived just now. It's also a bit of a unique event, but then again, if you look at the history of lecture and film, we've had these kinds of guests quite often, in that Ruchir Joshi is not an academic stricto sensu, but an artist, a filmmaker, a writer, painter, playwright, columnist, a multifaceted, talented artist whose work, by the way, we are going to come back to on, is it June 19th? With a special screening of his first 2 films, Memories of Milk and Tales from Planet Kolkata. Those are 2 films that deal with the city and speak about city that is at the center of tonight's program, Kolkata. MAHANAGAR by Satyajit Ray is the film that we're going to be seeing after Ruchir's talk. Ruchir also just finished a big historical novel on Kolkata in the 1940s, just before the Bengal famine hit the city, the famine that killed 3 or 4 million people, and has remained in memory as an... Sorry?
And nobody talks about this.
We do.
Nobody talks about this 3 or 4 million Australians.
Yes, few people talk about it, but it's quite present in India, and Amartya Sen actually wrote his most famous book about it, Poverty and Famines, in which he showed that famines in modernity were always politically induced and entirely preventable. That's the book.
I meant in Europe.
In Europe, yes, but
Sorry.
so we're not in Europe here tonight. Who did?
BBC. There's a BBC documentary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it doesn't, like in the on the Churchill monument near Westminster in London, it doesn't say on the back side that he was responsible for it. They could, you know, make that remark, but nobody's doing it. But in any case, so Ruchir's novel is going to be about Kolkata in the 1940s. It's going to come out, I'm going to plug it now, right? It's going to come out with HarperCollins in Britain and in India. For those interested, some of the translation rights are still available. So Ruchir has been recognized as a writer for more than 20 years. His first novel was called The Last Jet Engine Laugh, came out in 2001, and he's been a published writer in various forums ever since, and a filmmaker and an artist, as I already said. And this film, of course, fits into your own personal historiography of Kolkata, and we're very interested in what you have to tell us about both Ghataks and Ray's vision of Kolkata. It's so great to have you here. Podium is yours, please.
Yeah, that was a very generous introduction by Vincenz. Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation, all of you here at the DFF and the department. I'm very pleased to be here. Now, I think some of you have seen cloud-capped star Meghe Dakatara, and some of you have just walked in. So I am not a film studies person per se, though I study film, have studied film all my life. My approach is that I grew up in the Calcutta. I was born in 1960, which is when Meghe Dakatara is made, and then I was 3 years old when Mahanagar was made. But I became aware of Satyajit Ray when I was about in my teens, obviously. And then shortly after, I became aware of Ritwik Ghatak and Mrinal Sen, the other two great names of Bengali cinema at that time. And decided to be a filmmaker in my late teens. And after that, it's all been a little bit, some shape or form, about cinema. So my approach to looking at this work now, having seen them several times before in my life, when this opportunity came up and I got Mahanagar, I thought immediately of Meghe Dakatara as a kind of a bad twin of Mahanagar, if you like. And so I thought of putting the two of them together. I will, having seen some of the earlier talks, I know what people have concentrated on. Some of this might be repetition, but I just want you to imagine that there is a city called Calcutta, which is, till 1911 or so, the second most important city in the British Empire. It is a rebellious city, it is a volatile city, and the British moved their capital from Calcutta to Delhi, what they call New Delhi, and they take 11, 12 years to build this new grand imperial capital, and they shift lock, stock, and barrel. But Calcutta still has a lot of the commercial interests, a lot of the military interest, a lot of residue, more than residue of empire. At the same time, because it was the second city of the British Empire, to the extent, for example, the Bishop of Australia would sit in Calcutta till the late 19th century. I found that out when I was in Adelaide, actually. Someone told me that the bishop didn't go to convict country, and they sat and dealt with Australia from St. Paul's in Calcutta. The first round tunnels, which were then transported to make the London Underground, were designed for the Calcutta sewer. And at the same time, what happens is a class of Bengali and some non-Bengali intellectuals who go to college, who come in contact with Western culture, and what begins is something called the Bengal Renaissance. And that is a whole number of luminary, mostly men, but some women as well, in the 19th century who are very cosmopolitan, who engage with the Enlightenment, with Western culture, with European languages, with the world. and at the same time start looking deeply into our own traditions and culture. So there are too many names to mention here, but one important, hugely important figure is the figure of Rabindranath Tagore, who features in both the films. His shadow or his light both are there in Meghe Dakatara and in Mahanagar. Tagore dies in 1941. Calcutta in 1939, before the war starts, is a city of about 2.3 million people, right? And in this, you have three young men. You have Satyajit Ray, who's born, he's born in 1921. So by the time the war comes around, he's in his 20s. And then Mrinal Sen is born in 1923. Tapan Sinha is born in 1924. His name doesn't feature much, and we won't mention him too much today, but he's a fourth and probably the most unfairly dealt with of the big Bengali filmmakers. And then Ritvik Ghatak is born in 1925. So these men are all witness, young men are all witness to what happens to Calcutta in the war years, okay? They're studying in college, they are engaging with different aspects of culture, they're reading, they're learning, four of them actually three of them are from East Bengal. They moved to the West, which is a big cultural thing, from East Bengali villages and towns to come to the big city. And Ray and Ghatak share Shanti Niketan, which is a university that Tagore starts up. And they both go there for different periods of time. Ghatak is there with a woman called Indira Gandhi, who will become the future Prime Minister of India, for example, and they're friends. Ray goes to Shantiniketan and gives up. He doesn't want to be a visual artist, though his mother is forcing him. He comes back to Calcutta in 1943, joins an advertising company as an illustrator. Ghatak is in Shantiniketan. He comes out, and Ghatak and Mrinal Sen both engage with the Indian People's Theatre, IPTA, right, which is a leftist movement. It's a conglomeration of artists, poets, theatre people, painters who all come together as a left grouping under the sort of wide umbrella of the Communist Party and the socialist ideals. And they are there to, they're fighting for independence, but they're also fighting against capitalism and with varying allegiances to Soviet Union and the Politburo and the big Communist Party of India. So this is a kind of tradition that is happening in the 40s, where suddenly Calcutta is hit almost like a meteor. So what happens is a city of 2.3 million in 1939, by 1950 is a city of 8 million people. Now, try and imagine this. The area is the same, and your population has gone 5 times in size. And it's not a few thousand people. It is millions of people have come into the city. Why has this happened? There is the Japanese attack on Burma, where there's a lot of Bengalis working in Burma who all make the trek back out, Bengalis and other Indians, but the Bengalis come back to Calcutta. That's the first one. Secondly, the famine hits, the famine that no one talks about, but people do in India. And that famine has many reasons, many causes. Most importantly, the British Imperial administration is to blame for it, with the help of Indian compradors and middlemen and black marketeers. And suddenly, one of the most fertile regions of the world, people are starving to death. And they're in Calcutta carpeting the streets, the dead bodies, the villages. There is harvest growing at one end of the river, on the other side of the river, but the boats have been taken away because they're afraid the Japanese will use them. So people are starving here and the rice is there and they can't touch it. That kind of surrealist, macabre reality has taken place. And then after the war ends, you have 1946, where there's a huge riot and massacre between Hindus and Muslims as partition approaches. So Calcutta is the first place where the Hindu-Muslim riots take place, before they take place in Punjab and in the West and in the North. And they're horrendous, because Calcutta at that point is a half and half city. It's half Muslim, half Hindu. It's not a Hindu majority city at that point. And suddenly you have this kind of crazy violence going on. And the violence is weird because if you look at it in terms of today's ideas of anti-Semitism and what's happening in Israel and Gaza, the Hindus and Muslims are attacking each other in these streets. But at 9 o'clock every morning, they'll stop by agreement and part to let the Christians and Jews go through to do their markets and come back in 1 and 1.5 hours. And then they start butchering each other again. So this surrealism also, Ray, Ghatak, Sen, Sinha, all these people see this, right? And then suddenly there is partition, then India is independent. A lot of people from Bangladesh, East Bengal, which is now East Pakistan, they've also come. And you will see both these films are actually to do with those people who have come from East Pakistan, or East Bengal. So that Calcutta is the place where all these people enter cinema in different ways. Ray, Satyajit Ray starts a film society, and then he works with Renoir, who's making a film in India, quite exotic and not very good film compared to his actual real serious work. But he's got another young guy, Subrata Mitra, who's with him, who's interested in the camera. So Satyajit Ray and Subrata Mitra form this great partnership of director and cameraman, which will happen later. Mrinal Sen starts working as an audio sound engineer and gets into cinema from that angle. Ritvik Ghatak starts writing scripts and working with people and gets into cinema from that angle. And all these people start to work in the cinema, so to speak. And I'm giving you this because it's like we have seen so far a lot of the time Satyajit Ray in isolation as this kind of towering figure of Indian cinema. But he's part of a milieu, a context. And I think that context is important to recognize because he is in the culturally the most advanced and fecund and, how shall I put it, vibrant city of the subcontinent at that point. Tagore has just died, so you've got great cinema going on. You've got, not great cinema, you've got great theatre going on, music, dance, painting, literature. All this is bouncing around in Calcutta when these people decide to get into cinema for a living. So, on the one hand, that's the good part. On the other hand, there is great deprivation. All of society has been shattered. And this new country is staggering to its feet. And, things are in complete chaos. And an absolute brutal reality exists for the poor and for the people who've just come and settled at the city. So, it's in this that young Satyajit Ray decides to work on a novel, and he starts working at the age of 33 or something. He starts working on Pather Panchali, the Song of the Road, the first of his Apu trilogy films. At the same time, we don't hear about it very often, but Mrinal Sen, who's 32, makes his first film, which he wants everyone to forget and bury because he thinks it's a terrible film. But he's 32 at this point in 1955. Ritvik Ghatak is 33 in 1958. He's the youngest, and he makes his first film, Ajantrik, in 58, right? Tapan Sinha is 30 when he makes his first film, Ankush. So these are young men. These are not, as we grew up, by the time I grew up, they were like these towering figures, older men, we looked up to them, or we were angry or, cursing them as older, powerful figures. But these are all young people trying to do something in a new country with very, very limited resources. So someone like Ray manages to put together a great team. He's got Subrata Mitra as a cameraman. He's got a man called Bansi Chandragupta, who is his art director. And he's got Dulal Datta as his editor. And these are all people starting out. None of them is a professional. They're all amateurs who are saying, let's give it a try. And they start work on this film, and it takes them 3 years to complete Pather Panchali. And that film just explodes them out into the stratosphere of world cinema. The other two filmmakers, Mrinal Sen and Ghatak, since we're talking about them, are not so lucky. They make their films, they drop like a stone. All these people are going against the mainstream current. Bombay is already already making a certain kind of commercial cinema, which is not what you call Bollywood today, but it has songs, it has sentimental stories, melodramatic acting, and they are stories to appeal to a mass audience. So it's love stories or epic kind of mythological dramas and all this stuff, but they're not what you would now call a serious cinema or a cinema which replicates or is a counterpart to serious literature or a novel or something like, or serious theater. These people are all trying that because they're Bengalis, they're intellectuals, they have ambitions to, and they're inheritors of Tagore, they're inheritors of this whole Bengal Renaissance tradition, and they're steeped in the Western traditions as well, all of them, right? Satyajit Ray races ahead in recognition, and there develops something which is, I'm going to take a little detour into explaining to you what happens in a small town. Like, it's a big city and it's a small town at the same time, the milieu in Calcutta. So Satyajit Ray, Hrithik, Ghatak, Mrinal Sen all live in South Calcutta, which is where I grew up, and they all live within a few miles of each other. They know each other, okay? Ray thinks of himself as head and shoulders above everybody else, and he thinks that till his dying breath. Some would say with good reason. He is famous, established. Suddenly he is like the happening figure. By the time he's 36, 37, he's a star. Ghatak, at the same time, is so disappointed at the reactions to his films that this man who doesn't touch drink till the age of 30 is dead of alcoholism in 20 years. In 1976 at 51, before 51, he's 50, he's gone. Mrinal Sen, who is the same age as these people, but somehow always manages to look younger. And Mrinalda was the only one I knew personally. He was a friend of my father's, and I went and, attended his shoots and hung out with him a little bit. Lovely man. But out of the three of these people, for me, the least interesting, least talented filmmaker. This may be controversial, but I will say it. But a very, very nice guy, right? But he has a rivalry with Satyajit Ray, which develops in the 60s, where Ray criticizes one of Mrinal's films, and Mrinal Sen criticizes one of Ray's films, and this whole thing is a kind of frenemy rivalry that grows. I have a story in a piece I write about Ray when he dies called The Death of a Tall Man, and the story very quickly is that Hrithik Ghatak has an alcohol problem, so his wife will not give him money to go to the market in the morning to buy vegetables because he will go to the booze shop and blow it. So one day when she turns around to him and says, oh, go to the market, here is 20 rupees, he thinks he's won the lottery. But she also hands him his baby niece, grandniece, so his niece's daughter. Let's take her with you. Now, in Bengali culture, you cannot go into a booze bar with a small baby girl. You just can't, right? It's not happening. And it's a masterstroke. She's checkmated him, and he takes his baby, and he goes to the market, and he's buying the fish and the vegetables and stuff, and wondering how he can circumvent this checkmate. When suddenly he sees, Ghatak is quite tall, but there's a taller figure, 6'4" tall figure, and he sees it's Manik. Manik is Satyajit Ray's nickname, and he rushes up to him, says, Manik, Manik. And Manik looks at Hrithik and he sees there's trouble because he's also been sent out to buy vegetables by his wife. And he's, very tall and has a deep voice and is like, Hrithik, what can I do for you kind of thing. And he's like, just listen, you're here, how good. Just hold this baby girl for a minute, I'll be right back. And he leaves Satyajit holding this baby girl and disappears. And Ray, by this time, is a famous figure. He's already well known. So people are coming up to him, chatting with him. We liked your last film. Oh, that cut you made was very bad. Why did that character die? And he doesn't like dealing with the hoi polloi. And he's trapped with this baby girl. And he can't go anywhere because if he goes home, there'll be trouble with his wife. Why did you bring this baby girl home? And she has to be returned now. And he can't just take this girl and go somewhere. So he's stuck there while Hrithik goes to the bar, knocks back 3 or 4 quick drinks, comes back, and takes the girl from Satyajit. And as he takes her, he sees that the girl has peed in her nappies or whatever, and peed a bit on Ray's shirt. Says, oh, she did that, did she? Why did she do that? She hasn't seen your last film. So, okay, now this is an apocryphal story, but this is a story told to me by a very serious, the nephew of another great filmmaker, Bimal Roy, who worked in Bombay and who knew these people intimately. This was the story he said. So Ghatak had contempt for a lot of Ray's work and also resentment at the fact that Ray was getting such recognition. And part of the drink, apparently, was because he was so upset at the fact that he wasn't being recognized as the filmmaker he thought he was. Mrinal Sen would always say, oh, Mr. Ray, yes, he likes to draw and stuff. I can't draw. I don't make drawings of mine. I mean, I don't do storyboards. I work on my films with my cameraman. And his cameraman would tell me that, Mrinal Sen, with Mrinalda, he doesn't have a very clear idea of the frame. We have to tell him, then he looks, and then you fix the frame, and he gives you the idea, and you do it. Someone like Ray would worry about 1 millimeter this way or that. I've seen him at a shoot in Ghare Baire, which is Home in the World, where he's on a crane, and there's a massive set on and hundreds of people milling around, and he's already got a heart problem. This is one of the last few films he makes. And he's calling out to someone, and then at some point he says, take me down. And he gets off the crane while people are milling around. He walks to one corner of a pillar, grabs a burning lamp from someone, a drying, Bunsen burner type thing, and he blasts some wet patch that he can see from his frame. Now, Ghatak and Sen would never do this. Ghatak would have an idea of the frame, but he wouldn't be so meticulous about detail. And Sen would leave it to his cameraman to deal with this stuff. But Satyajit Ray was hands-on about everything. So if you look at Mahanagar, be aware that Bansi Chandragupta is a great art director, but every detail that's there in the set or on the street or everywhere is controlled by Ray, right? So this is the kind of rivalry that's happening. They're coming from, they've seen Western cinema, they've seen Japanese cinema. Somebody the other day told me that, I know where Ghatak has stolen his frames from. I saw some early Mizoguchi silence, and the moonlight and the clouds in Meghe Dhakatara come from there. Yes, but then if you look at the mise-en-scene and Satyajit Ray stuff, a lot of it comes from Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or Cukor or Renoir. They borrowed, they lifted, they took very happily. Someone like Mrinal Sen is the only one who goes directly into trying to grab from Godard or from the newer people. When Ray starts to do this in the 60s, which is not in this, towards the end of this Mahanagar, you will see some stuff going on, expressionistic and a little bit of melodrama at the denouement scene, which goes against the grain of the whole rest of the film as far as I'm concerned. But it's an interesting thing because by now, he's going abroad every year, Satyajit Ray, to several film festivals, seeing world cinema. He's sitting next to Kurosawa and Bergman and this and that, and he's watching stuff, right? If you see Cleo 9 to 5, Agnes Varda, there is a whole wonderful swinging movement. If those of you who've seen it will remember at the piano where this woman is rehearsing, and the camera kind of like swings and dances. And Ray may or may not have seen that, but the Charulata swing scene that you see, and this one are, so sometimes great minds think alike at the same time, and it's not even about lifting or copying. You're in the zeitgeist and you somehow absorb and come up with similar ideas. That can happen too, right? But, I mean, if you come to these films now, so Ghatak makes Meghe Dhakatara in 1960. It is about, for those of you who haven't seen the film, about a middle-class family fallen on hard times. They're refugees from East Bengal, and they're living in this kind of shanty town that has come up to the south of Calcutta, with these refugee colonies of bamboo huts and stuff have sprung up. And they're living in these colonies. The father is a school teacher, and he doesn't earn much, and he's trying to teach these kids. You see them singing the national anthem in one of the early sequences in the film as he goes out to teach them. And there is a daughter of the house, the older daughter of the house, who is working towards her MA, but she's also doing tuition and bringing in 40 rupees a month. And the whole story revolves around her support for the family and how the older brother who wants to be a singer, the younger brother who wants to be a footballer, the good-for-nothing younger sister who just wants to be glamorous, the mother who is supposed to care for all her children equally, but she doesn't. She has selfish motives. The father who loves everyone but is weak. It's this milieu in which Neeta goes out and supports the whole family with her earning. Whereas in Mahanagar, without giving away too much of a spoiler, Arati is a wife in the house, married to a husband. They have one son. In the original story, there are 3 or 4 children that the husband's parents have produced. The husband has siblings. In this, there's only one daughter. So her sister-in-law, who is also like 14, 15 in high school. Again, they come from East Pakistan. So basically, in the original story, the husband and wife have moved into Calcutta, have had a son. When partition happens, the father and mother and daughter, husband, sister, come to Calcutta. And then they think they'll go back, but they never go back. There is a slight class difference. These people live in a bamboo and shanty kind of hut in Meghdakatara. In Mahanagar, they live in a lower class, kind of lower middle class, joint dwelling with people looking in, etc. But you got the porch outside on which the cooking is done, and there's rooms inside which are very small, cramped, and the street is just outside the window. Again, the street in both the films is just outside the window. And in the original story, it's the husband who comes and tells the wife, actually, we need to earn some more money. My friend's wife is working. Will you consider getting a job? And the wife first resists, and then she says, okay, I'll get a job. In the film, Rai changes it so that the husband comes and tells the wife that his friend's wife is working, and she says, oh, if she's working, why can't I work? I will get a job. Whatever it is, the whole story revolves, what you're about to see, is that Arati goes out, goes for an interview, and gets a job. And her dynamic as a person who's now earning money, the in-laws are ashamed and cannot bear the fact of their daughter-in-law going out. The husband at first is very proud and pleased, but then he becomes more and more insecure as he sees his wife growing in power. Her style, her fashion changes, she's meeting people, what's going on, right? And there is a beautiful, 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 my favorite thing about Mahanagar, sorry to not ruin it for you, but to prejudice you, is the young sister, Jaya, who's played by Jaya Bhaduri. And she's like this sparking, she's like, Rai has discovered several great actresses. One of them is Sharmila Tagore, one of them is Aparna Sen, and Jaya Bhaduri. Jaya Bhaduri is a young Bengali, talented, 14, 16-year-old in this film, in 1963 when it's made, and she steals the scenes in the film from all these great actors, right? She's so good. And she has one scene where she says to her sister-in-law that you're getting a job, but you're beautiful. You could go to Bombay and be a film star. And the sister-in-law says, come on, don't be silly kind of thing. The only person who goes to Bombay and actually becomes a film star in that entire movie is Jaya Bhaduri, who is now married to Amitabh Bachchan, who you guys may have heard of. And she is also MP for the Akhilesh Party, which has just managed to win some stuff. So, I mean, it's funny to see this film now, 60 years later, and think, oh my God, look at that, you know. So there are lots of things. So one of the things, I don't know how I'm doing for time. There's so much one can talk about. But, I mean, I just want you to understand shooting in Calcutta is something that people don't discuss enough. The actual practical act of shooting. So till the 1980s, if as a documentary cameraman, a filmmaker, I would take a 16mm camera and go and put it on a tripod. On any crowded road in Calcutta, I would get a circle of people looking into the camera, saying, who's the star, what is happening, and you couldn't bloody shoot. So Ghatak can go and do stuff in Paris. Fassbinder can do stuff here. In India, that's not possible. In Calcutta especially, because a camera was such an exotic thing even then, and it always signified some kind of a film star. That to shoot a naturalistic scene on a street, have actors passing by, do stuff. No. Scorsese can do it in Taxi Driver. We couldn't. So all these films that you will see weird things. One, they're all about the city. But if you look at the Meghe the first time the city actually comes up is like at minute 38. Before that, it's all inside a house or just outside in the semi-rural, this camp kind of thing. And then a few times you see the city, Dalhousie Square, which is the center of the city, or, you know, her office, or trams going, or you will catch feet going. And in the city, the camera is always tilted up. Why is it always tilted up? Because the crowd is there and you want to exclude them, right? You can't have the camera straight and do a track. You can, but it's very rare that you can pull it off. Mahanagar, again, the first time the city shows up is something like in minute 31 or something like this, right? Till then, it's like a theater play. It's like a very sophisticated filmed play in this small house. And Ray, unlike Ghatak or Sen, is very, very meticulous, detailed storyboarding. He has this whole Hollywood master shot and detail thing. He doesn't follow it slavishly, but not crossing the line. Or you'll see the camera in the first 30, 20 minutes of Mahanagar. Please note, it's there. There's beautiful action going on in the background. The sister is forever shutting doors. The kid is doing something. Everything is beautifully planned, but it's all within the constraints of a claustrophobic small house. And you got Subrata Mitra shooting, so the visual handwriting is very different. With the Ghatak, he wanted the dramatic lighting. He didn't mind unrealistic shots with different reflectors showing up, as you saw, those of you saw Meghe. And he liked the wide angle with one face very close and everything else happening in the background. Ray is much more a sort of normal lens. He's much more level. He doesn't go up too much. Down, yes, in the city, but otherwise not too much low angle, right? And there are small changes, like in Indian classical music, like microtonal changes of lensing and removing a table and cheating and going closer back, this, that. And everything is worked out in the acting and very, very small, precise, quite beautifully done moves of the camera and the editing. And whereas with Ghatak, you have sound which hits you on the head, quite expressionistically. There's two people are having a dialogue, there'll be drums in the middle of it. You will get one musical sequence, another musical sequence, third musical sequence, right, one after the other. Ray spares it out like dessert in a long meal, where it starts with his theme that he composes. That theme comes up in the middle of the film, then it comes up again with a different tonality, then it comes up as tragedy, then it comes up as a thriller. And he's got some other stuff going on sound-wise, very, very precise. With Ghatak, you've got 6 or 7 different kinds of music in Meghe. You've got Bhatyali, which is the boat music. You've got Rabindra Sangeet, which is Tagore's music. You've got Baul music. You've got singing puja, which is a prayer ceremony. I just made a list today. It's quite crazy how much. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of music. Indian classical music runs through because the brother is practicing the music there. One of the rags he sings is Shankara, which he's called Shankar, so it's Rag Shankara. Then I think another rag is Durga, which is a prayer to the mother goddess. It's done ironically. Ruchir Mazumdar talked earlier, I saw a lecture about how Ray uses Rabindra Sangeet ironically in Jono Oronno. What is Jono Oronno's English? The Middleman. In The Middleman, but I would argue that for all these people, Rabindra Sangeet is ripe for being used ironically. So in Meghe, the love song, Je Rate Mor Duar Guli, the night my doors broke open, which is a love song, when the brother and sister sing it, there's a deep poignancy to it. And when Ghatak uses, say, another song about going out to the forests and moonlight night in Komal Gandhar, again, it's just off. It's not like a straightforward use of Rabindra Sangeet, right? So, Satyajit Ray's solution for the city is after 30 minutes. When he moves out, he's shooting from windows with people crossing the street, or from a doorway where something happens, where the camera cannot be seen, the actor is doing their stuff, and very rarely are you actually out on the street. 1 or 2 scenes, I won't spoil it for you, where he actually goes out, but otherwise. And all these people are struggling with limited means. So the cameras are old, the stock and the labs are unreliable. The moviola that they're working can tear your rushes, and then you have to put your precious negative through for another rushes, right? The recording of the sound, you'll rarely get sync sound. A lot of this is dubbed sound. Please remember, Godard can be, contemptuous about, oh, we're watching one performance and hearing another. But yes, that makes it more complex and more postmodern, I think, that we do that, yes? So, I mean, all these films, most of them are dubbed later. A lot of them, except for the studio stuff where the sound is controlled, where Ray would call out silence, and then the assistant and the assistant and the assistant silence would echo down this huge hallway when you go to watch the shoot. It's one of those rituals, and then he'd say action, and then action would happen. But on the street, there's so much traffic noise, there's so many horns in Calcutta again, that you cannot. I mean, now with modern technology, sound recorders, friends of mine, sort of managed to do it, in the last 20 years. But before that, no, it was not possible. Even if the crowd wasn't disturbing you, the level of noise was such that to be able to have a dramatic dialogue heard, recorded, at the same time as the acting is happening, it's a Western thing. It's a luxury you people have. We don't have it. And in a sense, it makes us attack the cinema medium in a very different way that creates a different kind of language. So, okay, So one of the things that I notice now is, I'm going to say it, is that when I look back at Ray and when I look back at Ghatak, when I was younger, there was a big chasm between them and a big gap, and an even bigger gap between Ray Ghatak over here and Mrinal Sen here. Now when I look back at that stuff 20, 30 years later, time compresses stuff in a very, very interesting, weird way sometimes, right? Because I'm 64 years old. These films are made around the time I was born. There are films that Ray and Ghatak and Mrinal Sen make in the late 60s, early 70s, when the Maoist movement and inspired by the 68 revolution in Europe and all kinds of upheavals in India, is all Calcutta is a center, burning center of a certain kind of radical revolt and student unrest and labor unrest, and people are scared, and the Maoists have taken to guns and are killing policemen, and there's some war going on, and police are killing the Maoists and executing them, judicial executions, extrajudicial executions, and the genocide in Bangladesh is taking place, and the Indian army is going in with the Bangladeshi Liberation Army, and basically East Pakistan is being freed from the Pakistani army. All this is happening around the time these later films are made by Ray, Mrinal Sen, and Ghatak, right? For me, these films, the early 60s films all get compressed and brought together. I see there's a gap between between Ghatak and Ray, but that gap is closed now because time is compressed stuff. And what you're about to see in Mahanagar for me is, I'm going to make this, it may not be a very popular argument, people will argue with me, that's fine, but I think the best of Ray that you get for me is when it starts with Apur Sansar, the trilogy, the work he does in the late 50s, early 60s, and here you're approaching peak Ray. This is 1963, where he makes The Big City, and in the next year he'll make Charulata, which for many people is his best film. After that, the films that he makes, he tries to tackle contemporary issues. Until now, he's dealt with the Calcutta of the early 20th century in Apur Sansar and Oparajito, and in the other films, and in his other Jolshagor and all this, it's all earlier historical narratives that he has taken. With Mahanagar, the story is actually written in 1949, but he doesn't stick to 1949 because the phenomenon of women going out to work in Bengal is still pretty fresh and valid in 63, clearly. So, written in 49, 14 years ago, but he changes things. But the attitude to Anglo-Indians or women's empowerment or the fact that a woman can go out and earn her own money and make decisions, all this is still of heavy import and heavy significance for his audience. So he makes this. Charulata, he does. And after that, there is Nayak and Gupiga in Bagabain, which are very, very great films. I think I love them. But the Calcutta trilogy that I was listening to your talk, I mean, I've seen those films and I just keep thinking how he doesn't manage to really, really get to grips with that Calcutta in the way he does with his earlier historic works. And the reason for that is, again, because this precisely tall, very well-recognized figure who has grown big in his own head, and he is not able to just anonymously walk around the street and see what's going on. He can't go to a cafe or a restaurant or a tea shop and sit and just chat with people. It's no longer possible for him. He's like Picasso or Rabindranath Tagore. They're sealed off. So everything that's coming to them is coming through stories people are writing. He will interview people. He'll be very meticulous. He'll go to a location and say, okay, what kind of a corporate office would be there? What kind of a factory would be there? You know, how would you create trouble in a factory? What's a back room look like? What is, the girls going to college? What happens there? He'll figure all that out. But from the heart, when you know what's going on, you're interacting with people and making a film about them. That is gone with him. And I feel that the films suffer from that. They also suffer from an insecurity because language is changing. You got Jean-Luc Godard makes Breathless in 1960 or 59. When is Breathless? Anyone? 59. 59. And, by the time Ray makes Genre or No, Godard is making Numero 2. Ray has been going abroad and he's been seeing Bresson, he's been seeing Bertolucci, he's been seeing Godard, he's been seeing other people. And he comes back and suddenly there is this kind of insecurity in his handwriting and his language, and he's trying stuff. But he's not trying stuff with, I feel, from the inside of his heart and his gut. He's trying stuff saying, I'm skillful enough, I can do this, I can weave this, I can show people how it's done. And there that insecurity starts showing up. And I find those films getting weaker and weaker and weaker. Of course, he makes Shonar Kella, which I love, which is a great children's thriller film. Chess Players is a weak film, but I still enjoy watching it for what he creates in terms of a nostalgia. There is an anti-fascist with the Hirok Raja Deshe in these films, and the 80s he's getting iller and iller, and the films weaken for my money. So for me, when I watch this now, I'm like, oh my God, this is why I love Ray. I have several problems with the film. I'll go into that when we do the Q&A if there is time. But, I mean, there are moments of such beauty and such grace in this, as there are very differently in a naive, much more rough painting, rough attacking the screen kind of person, like Ghatak, right? And I find so many flaws in Ghatak now. It's cringe-making, some of that stuff. There's no getting away from it. There's a Ghatak worship industry in Calcutta, as there is a Ray worship industry, and you cannot say anything against these people, right? And the Ghatakistas will fight with the Raistas, and the Raistas will sneer at the Ghatakistas. And we've all been in, this is the milieu from which I come, so, and these films come from there as well. So how are we doing for time? Wind up? Yeah. So I'm going to just say, there's just one thing, two things very quickly I will say, and then I'll wind up. One is that on the one hand, both these films are kind of a proto-feminist film where the director and the filmmaker and the scriptwriter are on the side of the beleaguered woman protagonist, right? But on the other hand, the depiction of, and both these films run on the faces of their main actresses, right, and other people, but those faces, like Jeanne d'Arc or one of these great sort of Bergman film or something like that, it's that face which carries the whole film, both these films, for me. Both very beautiful, very typically a certain idea of Bengali beauty, because there are many different kinds of Bengali faces, dark, not so well chiseled, etc., but they don't, I mean, both these women are of a certain kind of face, and the construction is of a very soft-spoken, there's a Bengali word called naka, which means kind of coy and self-conscious. And both these women speak in a very naka particular kind of way. And both these films are also this kind of great portraits of the amazingly weak Bengali man who you kind of want to slap and say, well, why don't you just put your foot down and say, this is not happening, and this is going to happen, and it'll all be solved. And no, it doesn't, because that man has hesitations, fears, insecurities, ego, arrogance, all these things mixed in this kind of thing, where the woman catches it in the neck. Woman catches it in the neck. And the last thing I would say is I am not a Bengali, but I'm born and brought up in Calcutta. And there is a great scene in the original short story of Mahanagar where Datta, the writer, writes that Arati has gone out to sell this machine, and she comes back and tells her husband that I actually went to a Marwadi's house. Marwadi is the business community that has also been living in Calcutta for nearly as long as Calcutta has been there. But they're not Bengalis. I'm a Gujarati, we came later. But Marwadis who are money lenders and business class, industrialists, etc., who Bengalis see quite rightly actually as having exploited Bengal, I've been there for the longest time. So she says, I went to a Marwadi's house, a Marwadi who didn't have a paunch. And he had a car, and his wife was buying a machine from me, so they offered me a lift. And I got into their new car, foreign car, and they drove me. And he says, you got into a car? He says, yeah, yeah. And she says, I was sitting there and I was talking to all three of them. The wife didn't speak any English, so I was speaking to her in Hindi. The man spoke English, so I spoke to him in English. And the driver was from our part of East Bengal, so I spoke to him in Bengali. Have you ever had a chance to speak 3 languages at the same time with people? And the husband is kind of shamefaced, a bit envious, and he shuts up. My feeling is when I look at the work of Ray and Ghatak and their portrayal of Calcutta, Calcutta has millions of non-Bengali people who've lived there all through the decades. There is no portrayal of them at all. No proper serious addressing of them, except for the Anglo-Indian character in Mahanagar that you're just about to see. He's a rare exception. There's lots more to talk about. I look forward to the question and answer, and thank you.
So it's quite late, but we can give ourselves a few minutes to talk about the film and come back to some of the things you said. I mean, one of the striking things about a film called The Big City is, as you pointed out, how little of the big city we see. It's really a Kammerspiel, and the only big outside shot is the closing shot. And it's quite amazing.
And then they do some back projections in the friend's office is one back projection, and then the boss's office, and he drops the aperture and stuff, but you can see it's
and I'm guessing the street scenes with the bank run and the house are actually in the studio.
The street scene looked like it could be on the street. Maybe they fenced off something, outside studio part or something like this. And the house is all studio. Yeah, very clearly, because they're clearly moving the walls, and where the camera suddenly is where it can't be before and stuff like that. So that's all studio. Yeah, it wasn't location, but
maybe one small observation, and then we go to the audience. One of the nice anecdotes that you told us is the one of Ray getting down from the crane to fix a little detail somewhere in the background, because he was always thinking in terms of the framing and the pictures. And there's some incredible shots in this film. The one in the in the cafe with the mirror where he disappears,
and the mosquito net
and the
mosquito
silhouette, which is a visualization of his sort of coming apart and breaking up. Incredible inventions. But then there are all these small details in the set design, like the calendars in the apartment, and of course the apartment of the Anglo-Indian
is probably a real apartment, I think, because that looked like a location thing,
right,
of a certain kind of old Anglo-Indian house, or maybe they reproduced it. But it's remarkable if they reproduced it. It looked real. Just the way when she walks in through the door and stuff, that was not a set. It gave me a feeling of, and of course the rich people's houses were real. I don't think they were sets, where the kids were and where the white man opens the door. And
right. But it's just striking how much he can tell in a very short time through the set design in terms of, social stratification, class, cost also.
All very economically done.
Right.
Yeah.
Very economically told. Do we have questions and observations?
I mean, just quickly to respond to you, Subrata Mitra doesn't often get enough credit, the cameraman, but when Ray is starting on Pother Panchali, Ray is about 32 or something, and Subrata Mitra is about 21 or 22, and he's never done cinematography before. He's done photography. And he studies, reads books, and manages to find whatever equipment they have and produces Song of the Road with that. And he invents this bounce light thing. I don't know if that's been mentioned before in the series, but Nestor Almendros and people credit him with that because they wondered how he got this soft bounce light. But basically, Mitra notices that in Indian houses and Bengal houses, there's a lot of reflected light that comes through because of the sunlight. So he starts to place sheets, like he puts one sheet on top which diffuses the light, and then there are bounce sheets outside windows of locations. So instead of using that hard silver foil thing or actual hard lights which you see in Meghe Dakatara and the Ritwik films, here it's much softer, subtler, the grey tones are much worked out. Even in a dark scene, it's quite precise, and you never see the shine in the actors' eyes or funny reflections on their faces or anything like that. So, and he and Ray work for 1-2 more films and then they fall apart. And again, anecdotally, irreverently, the rumor, more than one, I mean, rumor, whatever, is that and Ray is happily married. Subrata, I don't know whether he was married or not, but it was over Madhavi that they fell apart because they both developed a soft spot for her or something like this. But more than that, I think Ray was very arrogant, saying, I know what I'm doing and all your credit is because of me. And Subrata was like, well, no, I want to do it differently. And so he parts company with Ray, and after that he does very, very few films. I mean, he's worked for Merchant Ivory, Shakespeare Wala and Householder, which he does while he's with Ray. And then after that, he lives longer than Ray. If they split in 1966, I think he makes another 15 films in his entire life, if that, maybe even less. Doesn't work. He was a very difficult man to work with. And I met him a few times. He was a cantankerous, quite full of himself, obviously, because he's done some great work. He was a great cinematographer, but, very difficult. He asked to light up a shot and had 15 different meters, which he'd check with different meters. And then he'd pull out his Nikon F when he got confused and just use the photomic overall exposure and give that exposure. So he was a character, yeah.
Okay, we have a comment or question. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for your lecture. I've got 2 questions. You were hinting at the fact that you have some problems with the film, and of course I'm interested to find out what are your problems with this film. And the second question is, do you have a theory about these weak Bengali men you mentioned?
I don't have a theory necessarily. One comes across them, I think. Also, Indian men in general, I have a low opinion of, even though I'm one. But no, and I get mistaken for a Bengali man very often, most of my life. So, no, my problem with the film is, look, it's a beautiful film. It's beautifully mounted, it's beautifully acted, it's controlled. If you're looking for a certain kind of, the point I didn't get enough time to make is that Ray dismisses Ghatak as, oh, well, Ghatak is the most Bengali of all our filmmakers. And, I mean, what does that mean? Is Kurosawa more international and Ozu more Japanese? Is Fellini and Antonioni, are they more international and Pasolini more Italian? What is more? I mean, you're working in Bengal. And if you're not a Bengali filmmaker, what are you, right? But Ray's work, I wouldn't say it's always addressing the West or something, but it's very aware of what will look good, not look good, and he cares about that because he's aware of his Indian audience, his Bengali audience, and also his third addressee, which is the international festival audience, right? Ghatak would like that audience to be there for him, and in his lifetime he doesn't get it. But he doesn't give a damn beyond a point. Beyond a point, he knows what he wants to do and he'll go for it. But both of them, I mean, I've just been, there's a whole history of what happens with Gandhi and with the left movement, etc. In the 20th century, women start getting educated, women start taking leadership roles in the independence movement. And during the famine and after the famine, during the famine, the Mohila Attarokha Samiti, which is the MARS, which is formed by Indian and Western women to protect women against assaults and rapes by the hundreds of thousands of foreign soldiers who are there in Calcutta. From that grows a left feminist movement, which then plugs into the Tebhaga agitation for for the farmers' rights. Women even pick up arms during that struggle around independence. And a lot of these women come out, Bengali women, and they're teaching, they're working as activists. You never see these characters either in Ray or Ghatak or Tapan Sinha or Mrinal Sen. Mrinal Sen towards the end a little bit, but you don't see them. You always see these very soft, like even at the end when she's given up her job, she's nuzzling that ladder. Now, no self-respecting middle-class Bengali woman or even a poor woman would not nuzzle a dirty ladder like that in Calcutta. Those ladders are filthy. That is done for dramatic effect. And she comes out and she stops at one point. Then she goes across the wall and then she stops. That's, people accuse Ghatak of melodrama. That is Ray doing bad theatre at the end. What the hell was that, I mean, why is she sort of doing this thing? She's given up a job. She can just tell him. She could be crying. Fine. Anyway, so, I mean, it's these things when you notice it now. At that time, or even in the 70s or 80s, you watched it, you thought, okay, this was that time, and this is how women might have behaved, or something. Now you see it, and the 19th century woman that she is in Charulata, it's not that different. And is there no change between a woman in 1878 and 1963? Give me a break. So, I mean, it's that. And why is no man, except for the bad ones, they can be firm, like the younger brother in Ghatak's film. He says, I want my slippers. No, you go and you have to whatever. And this Mukherjee, very bad subtitling at one point, is called Father Mukherjee, which was a bit bad. But anyway, that's part of my problem with the film. It's just the construction of this unquestioning, almost admiring construction of a certain kind of woman and a certain kind of man. I mean...
Yes.
I can, yeah.
Please.
One thing that always strikes me about this film is how there are two films going on simultaneously. One is, of course, Aarti and, Bombul's story.
Bombul, yeah, I forget his first name, proper name.
And but the other stories of the father, right, the father-in-law or father, and it's amazing how much empathy the film gives that character, and always gets me, and it's kind of the very emotionally high moments of the film. There's this and I've always wondered is that from the book? Is it very much coming from
No,
there?
from the short story it isn't there. It's all added by Rai.
Yeah, and
because in the short story he goes to the students a couple of times and does stuff, but he doesn't badmouth them that much in the short story, right? And again, in the short story, there's I would say there are three films here, now that you pointed it out. One is Arati and Bombul and the kids in that one space. The other is the father's story. And the third is the women working and their office dynamics, right? And in the short story, it's interesting because Edith is at home. This man doesn't insult Edith to her face, but insults Edith to Arati. And Arati says, how dare you say that about Edith? And he says, well, if you don't like it, leave. And she leaves and she comes back home and the husband says to her that Edith is probably still smoking a cigarette at home and tomorrow she'll rejoin work, but you have done this. And then they both sort of say, but never mind, we can manage something like this. It's very different. So Edith isn't fired in the short story, for example. The father and mother figures are, I think he's added a lot of stuff. The sister's role, Jaya Bhaduri, I hope you all agree she was fantastic, but she's completely added, totally inserted into the whole thing. So, I mean, he's changed it a lot, the story.
No, that makes sense, and it's really that's what makes the story also, because it's about like you know, this kind of change that affects people in different ways, but it also is like unlike say the Apu trilogy, where there's a way in which there is an inevitability, you know, of like. So like we just watched Aparajito just, you know, 2 weeks ago, I think. And one of the discussions that we were having that day was also like this kind of like, you know, mother's own journey of like being able to like cope basically with this kind of migration that the children do and then the parents are left behind. And I think there is a different treatment happening here with this figure of the father, who is also coping with change, who's also coping with things that he did not anticipate in his lifetime maybe. But it's interesting like how the film treats him in a way that's, you know, with his like kind of Guru Dakshina model that he's like kind of working with there. It's like very weird. But I want to hear more about from you if you have any opinions. But it's funny because
he's one of the great actors of Bengali theatre, of Bengali films, right? And the other guy is equally Bijon Bhattacharya, who's the father who again also gets injured and falls down in Meghe Dakatara. He's also a really iconic actor of Bengali cinema. If you ever see Jukti Tokko or Goppo and the other Ghatak films, you see him in these crazy roles. And Chobi Bishas, of course, I mean, he's just, I mean, masterful in his fading patriarch role. And you have to compare the two mothers as well, I think. You know, they're both... one is more shrill and more Machiavellian, manipulative, etc. But they're both same sides of a certain kind of picture of Bengali matriarch kind of thing.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the presence of Anglo-Indian characters in the film, because in Ray's films we get a lot of Anglophilia throughout the film.
Oh yeah, he was very.
But Anglo-Indian characters, it's a rarity as far as I know.
Is there one in Seema Bodho in Company Limited?
There are
I can't remember. I haven't seen it for a while.
Actual British characters in Seema Bodho, rather than this kind of Anglo-Indian community. But I mean, it's also done interestingly here because we see also this very short moment of someone who seems to be more just a British man living in a kind of giant mansion and so on. And when we get into the Anglo-Indian house, it's as
lower middle class as the
lower
other
middle
house.
Class, kind of, but very in a kind of frozen early 20th century style or something.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to probe your thoughts about that.
Well, I can't. I'm trying to go through my Rolodex of Ray films to see if there are any other Anglo-Indian characters. I think what happens in all these films, whenever they show a sort of debauched scenario with a restaurant or some jazz bar, there is a kind of deep, in Ghatak especially, association of this stuff with capitalist Western debauchery and decadence, rather than appreciating it as a subculture of its own. He didn't get it, or chose not to get it. Ray, I think, would be similar. He was into Mozart and Beethoven and, you know, classical music and all the great English poets and everything, but I don't think he was... I mean, there's references indexical references of Dylan, etc., in Days and Nights in the Forest. But he doesn't really... I mean, there's some crooning music going on in one house she walks into, and then there's other music that Edith is singing when she comes into the bathroom, etc. But I don't think he has... certainly nothing as prominent as this one in any of his other films, his Anglo-Indian characters. And Anglo-Indians have this liminal position, because after the British left, they were in charge of the police and the railways and a lot of important administrative positions in India, and especially in Bengal and Jamshedpur and Bihar and various pockets where there were major Anglo-Indian sort of citadels, so to speak. And after the British left, a lot of Anglo-Indians immigrated to Australia and Singapore and, you know, wherever they could go. And the ones who stayed behind, or the ones who, you know, like other Indian middle class, lower middle class, failed or lost money or got trapped, were figures of, people looked at them with double contempt because they were not Indian entirely. They were Indian, but they were not Indian. And it varied. I mean, nowadays, if you see somebody who's Anglo-Indian, not Anglo, it doesn't matter so much in Calcutta. But at that point, there was, because they were the second rung after the British who lorded it over the natives. And there was that memory, fresh memory of that. So there was a certain kind of resentment and anger. And like people of low morals, because they were just of Western morals. They would kiss, they would wear dresses, they would listen to music, they would dance, they would not necessarily get married the first time they went out with a boy or a girl. They were like English, they were like Europeans. And so therefore, but they looked like brown Indians. So there was a lot of reproach for that, But I don't think Rai or Ghatak or Sen really go into Anglo-Indian characters much properly, except for this one. I can't remember anyway. I could be wrong, but...
Yeah. I mean, another thing that you talked about is that none of them were interested in the ethnic diversity and cultural
I just had that realization today when I was looking at the Ghatak, but also remembering Ray and remembering that little scene that is there in the short story, but not there. I mean, Ray decided it was too complicated to put it in the film.
Yeah. I mean, as you were saying, it was the second most important city of the empire, so it was one of the capitals of the empire.
Yep, second capital of the empire. Just like
Delhi is now the capital of the Indian empire, and empire capitals are never, ethnically homogeneous.
No. Calcutta was especially cosmopolitan because you had people from all over the world there to do business in the 19th, 18th, 19th century, and people from all over India came. Right. So, whether South India or North India, or Gujaratis, Sindhis, Punjabis, everyone was there. And there were many, many different communities. And for Bengalis to sort of jingoistically assume that Calcutta is a Bengali city and it's all about that. Yes, it is a Bengali city. I mean, it's a Bengali majority city, always has been. But there's so many different cultures crisscrossing that nobody really has tackled that properly, actually,
We do see, though, like a sub-layer in Ray's films of like this kind of a class structure where there are the Bengalis, and then there are the people who open the door or people.
The Bihari
but they
Darwans,
always speak
right.
Hindi. So there is a way in which language is used to, Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
There's a way in which language is used to show that presence, but it's only always fleeting, and it's always people who don't have major roles in the film. So it's that. But it's the milieu.
That's true. In the City trilogy, there are characters who are marked as Southern Indian, speaking Tamil. And then, obviously there's cost.
Abidjan also had a lot of language markers. The people they meet on the street, the people they take a cab with, stuff like that.
But Abidjan is set there.
It's a road movie. So
it's in Bihar. It's in that Jharkhand, Bihar area, right?
Yeah. But I guess the point is that people who do speak that language will speak it. It's just that they're not main characters in the film.
Yeah.
No, but I think Ruchir was specifically referring to the depiction of the city, and but really with the exception of confused about which one of the City trilogy films it is that has a Tamil speaking character. There's a whole of reference.
Oh yeah, I think there's some. Yeah. One more thing to point out here, just as detail, is that in the Ghatak, the characters are speaking when they speak to each other rather than in the city. They're speaking in a very, very strong East Bengal dialect. So Dhaka, Mymensingh kind of dialect as far as I could make out. And if you ever see Titash is the name of the river, that is impenetrable to me. I need subtitles because it's Komila dialect and he actually sticks to that. Whereas Mahanagar, though they say they are from East Bengal, the dialect is classic contemporary Bengali city, legible West Bengal, mainstream Bengali, if I can call it that. There's no subtlety there at all. He's cut that out.
Yeah. Any other questions or observations?
I thought maybe, and you hinted at that, talking about the problems of the film, that you probably wouldn't have liked the happy end. And because that's a very conservative ending, it's a Hollywood kind of ending. It's like the family is a resolution of all the problems. And there are some films in Ray where this doesn't happen, where we have completely different endings. And I think they're much more radical. So can you follow that with that, or can you agree with that?
I actually don't even have such a problem with the idea of this ending, in the sense that the husband finally accepts that, because I think in the short story, she says, you can find a job, and he says, both of us can find a job. And that's how the short story kind of ends, right? So I think it's the way in which he's done it with this nakamo, as I call it, this nakaness of coyness and nuzzling the stairs and nuzzling the ladder and the walls and all that. That's the bit I don't like. If they'd come down and they'd had a bit of a fight and then they resolved it and they said, yeah, we'll figure it out, fuck it, let's go. That would have been fine. They would not have said fuck it, but they would have said, the hell with it, let's go. I wouldn't have had a problem with, I don't dislike happy or positive endings. That's not all, I mean, it doesn't always have to be sad. It's too easy sometimes to have a sad ending, you know. So, I mean, we're looking at John Oronia's most negative film, but with Ghatak, it's inevitably a sad ending. I can't even, I don't think he has a happy ending in any of his films, actually. I think the last film he was making when he died, which he had shot few sequences of Bogolar Bongo Darshan. So Bogola's circuit around Bengal or something, bad translation, but Bengal tour, Bogola's Bengal tour, that was going to be a comedy and probably with a happy ending, and it was beautifully shot bits that he's shooting. But otherwise, Ghatak's, most of his films are tragic. Little bits of optimism thrown in at the end, perhaps, but Rai is much better with, I mean, with Opur Shanchar, of course, he takes the kid and walks off. That's beautiful. Then, what else?
Yeah. I'd say it's more of a Chaplin-esque ending than a pure happy ending. You know, a classical Hollywood film always has two plots. There's a professional problem, and then there's the formation of the heterosexual couple. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of a remarriage trajectory, and the ending is sort of open. It's much like the tramp walking into the sunset with his partner. Very Chaplin-esque.
It reminds me a little bit of the ending of Voyage to Italy by Rossellini, where they come together, but you're like, yeah, I think this couple has a lot of problems that it hasn't quite resolved yet. You know, they might think that they've resolve them, but I think
they can work it out.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
There's also Casablanca with those two walking in the mist, but that's it. I mean, it's the same.
Yeah, that's not a heterosexual couple.
It's not a heterosexual couple,
but it's a couple.
The beginning of a great friendship, right? So yeah.
I think it's also like more this idea of like fleeting hope, that there is hope, but only for a moment, and then they're gonna like fade into the crowd and have the same problem all over again, probably.
Yeah, or Megadakatara, one woman dies, but she's replaced by another woman whose slipper again breaks. So then, you know.
Okay, I'm afraid they're going to kick us out if we don't stop here.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for staying for the discussion. Thank you for the fantastic and illuminating comments.
Totally a pleasure. Wonderful to be here.
It's been really great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And we're back in 2 weeks.